All right, welcome back, everyone. Thanks for joining us for part 2 of the Chase Nation series. I guess we got a little mini series, a 2-part little deal.
Hi, I'm Tyler.
And I'm Dave.
We're charter captains from Sheboygan, Wisconsin.
We're also avid outdoorsmen. We love hiking, hunting, fishing, camping, and just being outside.
We want to connect you with the experts in the outdoors and hear your story.
We're stewards of this planet, and we want to make sure the hobbies we enjoy today are available for generations to come. This is Avid Outdoors.
Again, we have Travis Kissel and Sam Ubel from Chase Nation, and we promise we're going to make this one just about DIY hunts. So you got kind of the little bit of a mix there. We talked about video production, so a little bit of self-filming. Now we're just going to focus in on the do-it-yourself, out-of-state type of stuff. Is that right? Yeah. What's your background and what's your experience? Travis, you were saying that you did a little bit more of this sort of stuff. So what kind of adventures have you been on so far?
I've done 5 different, like, strictly DIY stuff. When I was younger, I went on a few guided trips, but DIY stuff, I've gone to Nebraska 3 times with a muzzleloader. I did a bow hunt in Wyoming for mule deer, and I did a rifle hunt in Kansas. And I guess the appeal of it was, I know we talked earlier in the previous one about relating to people, and there was a show back in the day called On Your Own Adventures that was actually on the Sportsman's Channel, and this guy Randy Newberg, I just really was drawn to it about how he'd pull up to public land, and sometimes he'd never been there before, and I just want to try my hand at that. So I did it once and kind of got addicted, and I've done it a few more times.
Talk about an OG.
Yeah. Yeah, dude, that guy's been around, and he's still putting out awesome content to this day.
Yeah.
But it's the big draw to me is just kind of packing up the truck full of gear. You don't know what lies ahead. Like you got 5-6 days to just, you got to shoot out there. You got to find some deer. You got to make it happen. And it's fun to shoot a deer back home, but it's like it's a little more special when you go out there and kill one on public land, and it just is, to me anyways. It's kind of fun.
So before we really get too far into this sort of thing, just because I'm rolling things through my mind as you're talking, like, that seems super intimidating to me. How did you get through that? You know what I mean? And how do you, like, I guess what I'm saying is, like, you've done a couple of these. When you, like, how do you go to a new place and do that same sort of thing again? Like, it would be gut-wrenching for me thinking about this and ahead of time. Like, I don't know. Like, talk about that.
It's like the first year, there's giant whitetails in Kansas. That was my big thing. And that was like the first time I ever really attacked that. And to be honest with you, it was kind of a flop. Like, we saw some deer, but it was way different than I'd kind of envisioned. And I had all these spots I wanted to go check. And what I ended up doing was driving around way too much and checking these spots instead of, like, day one we saw some deer, found some deer, and it's like, I want it better. But instead of, like, just sticking to my guns and, you're seeing deer. You're out of state. Like, why would you not stick with that? We kind of moved around too much, and like I said, that trip it didn't work out the way I'd hoped. But
did it help you kind of scout out for maybe another trip?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, so,
like, I guess my biggest thing, when you go somewhere and you do find deer and you do find sign, like, stick with it. Like, and on the contrary, like, if there aren't deer there, you got to go find them, And like I said, we drove around, but, like, sometimes putting miles on the truck is not a bad thing either.
Because go find them. If there's not deer there, and go find them is a part that people have a tough time swallowing.
And it's the biggest, like, you got to make quick decisions. Like, you don't have a whole season to hunt these deer out there. Like, you have 5 or 6 days. So, like, if it's not happening, you got to go find something else. You know what I mean?
People become really attached to spots. They do their online aerial scouting. They become, they convince themselves, like, hey, this spot looks perfect for this or that. Or, I found this saddle, and it's connecting these 2 woodlots, and it's a perfect funnel or whatever. And then they go there, and it might look good, it might not, but they stick to it because they're like, well, I only got 4 or 5 days. I got to get home. My wife's already texting me. You got to get home sooner. And they got that pressure. And trust me, that pressure is real because if you don't come home with something, let's be honest. I mean,
It's kind of the walk of shame.
You
stuff.
gotta,
I told everyone else
long
was
walk.
going
you
on west,
were
man.
gone all those days and you came back with nothing.
Yeah.
All right, so
I feel ya.
but personally, from a personal level too, you're like, what did I do wrong? And so if you become attached to something and you won't let it go, you really have to be able to walk into a piece. If you don't see fresh sign, you need to have the wherewithal to say, I'm gonna get the hell out and go look for it. It's just a matter of fact. And if you got to burn a day driving around looking for fresh sign, that's hunting in a nutshell, whether you're in another state or your own.
And I think, I made the mistake honestly, this last weekend we were out turkey hunting. And it's like, when you're hunting a different area, just because what you think the deer might not be using, you have to remember they live there. We're hunting turkeys in big steep hills. And it's like, well, why would a turkey want to walk up this big, massive ridge that's like 200 feet high to get up to the top? It's like, well, they live here, you know? And I think that's a big thing when you're out in a different area that's totally different terrain. You have to remember they live here. Their habits are different. Their food sources are different. I've done a couple out of state hunts, and it's a total eye opener to understanding deer, especially deer. We're talking a lot about deer, but about the way that their mannerisms change from different ecosystems, basically.
And time of year is huge too, because we went to Wyoming a few years ago. A friend of mine, Dustin, and myself, we went out there, and it was like 85, 90 degrees during the day out there. It was miserable. So find some water. They got to eat too. Last year, me and Steve went to Nebraska, and dude, they just got 17 inches of snow. Find the food. We saw so many deer. A lot of them were on private land, but if you found egg fields, those deer were feeding.
Were those over-the-counter tags too? Or?
Yeah. Kansas and Wyoming were draws. Nebraska's an over-the-counter tag.
That's a big deal. You and your cousin and the rest of your family that hunts over state lines. You guys are always talking about you got how many points for this state? How many points do you have for Wyoming?
4.
4 points from
four elk points. I burned some deer points the other year when I went, but actually I have moose points out there too.
See, people don't understand that, and I don't even understand it, and I'm trying to do it.
The best person to talk to on this would actually be my cousin AJ. He's I'd be willing, but he's got spreadsheets, logging his points and stuff. It's, there's the over the counter stuff, and then there's the stuff that hey, you gotta log you might have to log 10, 12 years of points to get to this hunt. But in the meantime,
you better be ready to do it when you get drawn.
Right, exactly.
Well, I heard a guy on a different podcast talk about, you can save up all these elk points, but you better go do some over-the-counter hunts before you get there, because if you've never hunted elk before, you do not want to go out there not knowing what you're doing.
That's
with
a good point.
With your
That's a
big,
really good
with your
point.
big draw. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you want to have made those mistakes on an over-the-counter type hunt.
So to kind of back up a little bit, we're with talking about the DIY hunts, especially out of state. When you get this desire to go out of state, whatever, is it because you want to shoot a different species? Is it because you want to just try a different terrain? What's your first deciding factor
really
on
question.
where you want to go?
For me, mule deer. I kind of have a thing for mule deer.
Yeah,
I just
never had a curiosity about mule deer until recently. I was like, you know what? Maybe I do want to shoot one.
So
Because they all look huge, right? They all look
Yeah.
really big, and you're like,
Yeah.
I can't relate. It's like we're in the upper Midwest, and we watch these guys catching bass down south, and it's like, man, I can't relate.
Yeah. Right.
Give me muskies, give me catfish in these little tributary rivers coming
Or
off
even
of
a
the Fox.
5-pound bass.
Yeah,
That's
it's like, hey
right.
man,
Oh my
this
God.
is a
That'll
different
trip your
ball
triggers
game.
much.
So muleys, you got 200 and some inch deer. It's like that thing's regular to you. Come on, well,
Yeah.
not regular, but
it's
give me a
kind of
break.
wild. You want to talk about going out there and you got to be fluid when you're out there. You know what I mean? First year, the only year I've gone to Wyoming bow hunting, me and my buddy, we drove out there. We parked our truck at 1:30 in the morning on a piece of BLM land. We slept in the truck, got up in the morning, dug our camo out of the truck, which we didn't pack at the back of the truck. So we're pulling our truck apart. We put our camo on, and we started driving to where we saw the public was, and we were going to glass the deer coming off of fields. We saw 3 just beautiful muleys coming off this field, and they were close to public, but they weren't on it. And we kind of fell in love with those bucks for a few days, and we put our tent in this little ditch, and it was not a fun camping situation. But then one day we were sitting there, and I had some maps downloaded on my phone, and I was sitting there at lunch, and we were eating something, and I'm like, dude, we got to go check this spot out tonight. So we go down there, and we went there that night. We had a couple close calls. The next morning we drove down there, saw even more deer. We drove right back up, probably like half hour away to where we were camped earlier. We pulled our whole camp and moved, and we ended up killing a buck down there. He shot a buck.
Yeah.
So you got to be fluid. Don't get married to a spot. Like, we probably could have watched those 3 big bucks all week long, and they might have never crossed on the public.
Yeah.
So be fluid. Be mobile. Like, you gotta.
Would you agree that it's important to have a friend to do a trip like this with too? I mean, not to say because you gotta sleep in a truck sometimes at truck stops or whatever the hell, because you're living on the road. But I mean, for the sake of one of you might have different living situations and be able to go scout, and you pay your dues in different ways.
Yeah.
I mean, one guy is like, you know what, I can actually escape here just to go out there to scout, and then we go out there 4 months later and hunt, and he's already got the lay of the land.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or just to help make decisions.
Or just even like a second point of view. You know what I mean? Like, you can't. It's really easy to convince yourself of stuff, but when you got a second opinion right there, you're like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We should try that.
So yeah, pack in like a whole season. So here in Wisconsin, we got months and months and months to bow hunt. You can figure it out after a while, but you pack it into 4, 5, 6 days. That's what you got to kill something. Get your money's worth, because it might have cost you $500 or $600 for that tag, and you also been paying for points $60 a month or a year. Sorry. For how many years? 4 or 5 years leading up to it.
Points aren't cheap. Like,
you got a lot invested, and then there's the time. That's vacation away from your family. That's your vacation time. You gotta make it happen. So if you come home with tail between your legs, that's a bummer. So you got pressure.
And I think it's easy for people to let that pressure get to them, like you said. And I think having the 2 people, it's like, because when pressure starts getting on somebody, I mean, it's easy to like just fast forward, like move. You gotta find deer, like you said. You're just trying to find deer. You spend too much time in the truck. Sometimes you gotta slow down. You gotta have somebody there to kind of tell you, like, man, just slow down, or look for deer, or like a different way to approach a deer. From like, my biggest problem when I was out west and hunting out of state was I couldn't put a stalk on a deer to frickin' save my life. I'd lose where the deer was at all the time. So to have the second set of eyes to say it's by really this tree or whatever. And like, I think another mistake that I made in the past, and you don't see it a lot because obviously you don't get to see the mistakes all the time, is people don't watch an animal long enough to understand what that animal is going to do or what the animal is doing, and then make the stalk on it. They see the animal, they go.
You immediately get in your head like, he's gonna do this.
Yeah.
Instead of like, feeling the situation out a little more like you probably should. But also when you're doing these DIY hunts, you're in limited time, so like, you want to get after that opportunity as soon as you can.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So how long, like, you decide where you want to go based on what animal and stuff like that. But different states, we're talking about preference points. So kind of maybe explain that a little bit, because some people, like here in Wisconsin, we have preference points for bear. And we have preference points for turkey as well. But
even as a resident, it takes years.
Most states are the same way. Like, there's they'll break them down into units. Like, certain units are going to be like a 5-point unit or like a 10-point unit. And there's units in Colorado where people burn like 20 points to hunt elk. And
why though?
They're trophy units is what they are. There's the best genetics there. There's huge bulls there. So you save up all your points. And then there's a thing called like point creep, where like, okay, so it's a 20-point unit this year. Next year might be a 21-point unit. Well, if you're sitting at 19 and you're at 20, like, you'll never catch it. So that's kind of
nobody thinks about that.
That's like a big thing right now, like with
Such
some
a
of these
good point.
big units.
You have to actually be on your game to know that. And what else? I mean, here's another big thing that nobody thinks about that I learned through Travis and his cousin AJ, is the trespass fees. I mean, those are things that you can take advantage of when you're over state lines.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that's not
Or-
if you Google trespass fees, which I've done, it's not. Don't worry, it's not like a shameful thing. It's legit. Like, it's not just outfitters; it's private landowners. You're just saying, hey, I'm not going to lease your property, but I will pay you this much money just to hunt it for a day or for 2 days or whatever you agree upon.
Yep.
That's a trespass
And when
fee.
last year when me and Steve Jeffrey went to Nebraska, we just knocked on doors, and the one guy, he was plowing out the end of his driveway. Steve's like, "That's him. Let's go." He had an 800 acre river bottom. He gave me and Steve free reign of it. It's like, go for it. And there was another guy we pulled in by, and turns out he was an outfitter. And
He's
we
an
sat there,
outfitter, and
we
there's
got
a
car salesman spiel on how to hunt his deer. We're like, yeah, dude, we don't bring that much cash with us.
and they filmed it, and there's a deer walking right behind them. It's on, if you watch the Nebraska, the do-it-yourself
You gotta
public
look
land
close,
hunt
but
in
it's
Nebraska. There's a deer walking about 100 yards away, right behind these guys, talking about getting permission to go hunt the land. They didn't even know it was there.
Yeah.
When you
It's
knock
just
on the
cool.
door and he goes, "Yeah, I'm an outfitter," it's like, you can't get out the driveway fast.
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah.
well, I know you're not going to say yeah. Now you're going to try to sell me a hunt.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Everything's visible from the road, or you can make money on it. I mean, everybody wants to make a quick dime. And my land experience outside of state lines of Wisconsin, anyway, has been Minnesota, and I filmed 2 years with Whitetail Adrenaline, and we went to it's 100% public land. And you don't even think about where you're hunting beforehand. I mean, you could, but I didn't, and I don't think Jared did either. I mean, we just we went and visited a couple spots he'd hunted in years past, and we walked in and out, there's no sign, we bebopped out of there. And then we looked at Onyx and any other kind of means we had possible to find other public land, and that looked hard to get into, and figure out a means of getting into it. And one day we were like, hey, there's on this one river, it's a real hilly terrain. There was 4 pieces of public along this river, and all of them were hard to get to. Every single one, even the one you have to drive into, you got to walk down this little sliver path. By the way, when you park in this sand lot, right, there's a little like wooden railing preventing trucks from driving down this 2-track that goes down into the public, and there's no trespassing signs on both sides of it, because the private landowners that own the land around this sliver, this easement into the public, want to scare you off from going into the public, because that's surrounded by their private, and to them it feels like it's theirs, right? And if they put their no trespassing signs on their land an inch off of that public, you don't have reception, no cell phone reception. I had AT&T and he had Verizon, and neither of us were getting even a single bar up in this hill country area. Mm-hmm. And so we're like, well, shoot, there's nobody to call. There's no way we can Google anything. We're just sort of flying by the seat of our pants. And now you're wondering, is that actually public? Because the screenshot we have shows it's public, but it's all these trespassing signs. Okay, so that's really frequent. Then you get into the piece, then you get down to the river, and then you take a canoe if you want to hike one in, or you find a spot to put in. And you go into a piece, you walk in, you're like, it sucks. You go out, you go to the next piece, and it's not that easy. You got to get out of your boat, you got to walk it up the stream against the current, and there's rapids, and then you get to another piece. And finally, like in that particular hunt, from the first time we did this, we had run into a deer, and I missed a 13-pointer at 30 yards that I thought was 40, and I shot right over him. I mean, it's the most embarrassing thing to have a deer like that. I was... now that I'm thinking about it, really upsetting. But then I killed another deer 30 minutes later. I mean, so we're like, well, that sucked. We found my arrow, and we went up the ridge halfway, and there was a bench, and we started walking this bench, and we found a deer that just got up off his bed and was making his way down, and he was scent checking for does. The thermals coming up the ridge. We were just above him. Luckily, we had enough elevation, and shot down and killed that deer at 40 yards through the timber. And those are really cool hunts. That's where we luckily, Jared lived close enough where we could go back to his house and sleep. It was an hour-and-a-half drive, but whatever. And you have a nice place to sleep. Some of these hunts like Travis has been on, or like Joe Braun from our team, or any of the other guys, some of them are sleeping in their...
Joe sleeps in his truck, man.
Yeah, sleeps in his truck. Joe Braun, he goes to Kansas, Mississippi, everywhere you can think of. I don't know. Illinois, Louisiana, where else is he at? Iowa, Nebraska. Anywhere he can go and get a tag, he goes, and he'll just sleep in his truck for a week or two.
We tent when we did Wyoming. It was warm, so we tented it. But like, you talk about feeling dirty after 6 days of 90-degree weather.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
The other thing that I learned is that you need to take advantage of your local resources for information. You're scouting from outer space online, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're utilizing your cell phone and you're looking at Onyx. Well, okay, where is public? But you're also kind of, if you're really truly willing to not be attached to a specific area and you're willing to stay mobile, you're going into gas stations and believe it or not, there's still bulletin boards with pictures of deer on walls in some gas stations, especially small rural towns. And you start looking and paying attention, and you maybe ask the guy working there. He might not look like he hunts, but he might know somebody or see enough people going through that do.
Or spill the beans on something he's not supposed
All
to know.
this makes it mean
Yeah.
when Travis and Steve were in Nebraska, they talked to a guy that was just there shoveling out some snow that blocked the door to get into their room because of that big snowstorm. And they're sitting there talking to him about deer, and the guy could care less about deer. He probably thinks deer bite people.
Yeah.
But he was willing to at least talk to them enough to like just spill a little bit of beans about how is hunting around this area. And then you know if we should even spend time there.
Yeah. And I think that's a big thing too, is when you're doing a DIY hunt, it's not bad to not hunt public. It's okay to, like, there's a lot more people that are willing to give you permission for their property than you would think. Like when we went out, we hunted public in South Dakota, and my grandfather went out and scouted like 2 months beforehand, so that helped a lot. You know, he's retired, he had the time to go and do it. And he stopped at the local Chamber of Commerce. I was talking to the lady at the front desk, and the lady at the front desk goes, well, we own like 1,200 acres. Mm-hmm. And she's like, it's just you and your grandson hunting? And
trespass fee.
Yep. Well, and she goes,
give you $200, 112 acres for 2 days.
Yeah, she goes,
never make the offer first.
Yeah, right. Well,
I'll rake your lawn and then let me go walk it first.
Well, and that's how it went. She goes, you guys are just bow hunters, right? And we're like, yeah. And she's like, well, then just, I guess let me talk to my husband. And he called back and said, yep, go for it. You can have it. So our trade was 7 days of hunting for like 3 dozen Sheboygan hard rolls. It was perfect.
Like the guy that gave me and Steve permission in Nebraska, the first thing I did when I got back was
send me cheese curds.
Dude, I sent him a cheese box from Kissel cheese.
Yeah,
That's awesome. Yeah.
And that goes a long ways, you know. It's not always a monetary thing, you know. And like you were saying, you know, talk to the people at the local taverns and the local. You know, this gives you an excuse to go to the bar.
Absolutely.
And they're, like you said, the person who, when you're in these rural towns, especially in places that are out west, or maybe, you know, they're hunting related or whatever, and if the person doesn't look like they hunt, they probably know somebody that owns land, and maybe nobody hunts it, and they might be that way where they're like, well, we don't really hunt. Like, there's a lot of cattle farmers that don't hunt, you know, and but nobody hunts their land, and they really don't care, you know. It's, to them, it's about making money a different way, you know.
Some of them are just excited to see somebody outside their town.
Yeah.
I think if there's one thing that you need to make sure you're thinking about when you plan to do it yourself hunt out of state is think less about private land, play that by ear on the fly, but focus on the public and do your research. Look on the internet, find out how many acres of public exist, find out where there's clusters of it, and then find out how close cities are to it. The closer they are, the more populated they're going to be, the more pressure is going to be. It's really simple stuff, right? Then when you get there, don't be so excited that you got to dive right in. Drive around a couple times and figure out where other people are accessing. Where is the most likely spot somebody's going to access? And then pick the most absolute other side. Yeah. And if you have to think about buying a guy a case of beer when you ask him permission to walk across his front yard to get to the backside of public land, to get in that back door, do it, and do it again and again and again. You'd be amazed how many people will be like, yeah, go ahead. Nobody's ever asked me that before. Hey, can I park my truck in front here? I just want to walk across your yard to get into the public land back there. He'd be like, shit, yeah, go ahead. But nobody else is doing that because they're either too chicken to do it or they didn't think to do it.
Yeah.
If you do that, all of a sudden you find yourself in a honey hole, especially if it's on the other side of a river or some sort of water blockage.
And who cares if some guy 14 hours away says no.
Yeah.
Right.
Move on
Really?
to the next
Yeah,
one.
you can't really be too worried about it. You're just like, this is the one and only
All right,
time.
so I'm still hunting public.
Yeah.
now.
Hey, you
know
said
what I
yeah.
mean?
Hey, man, in another 5 years when I draw again, we might talk. You might not live here. That shouldn't be a concern.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's the kind of thing you need to be thinking about. You need to be thinking about, how am I going to eat out of my truck? Bring enough blankets to sleep in my truck. Don't be afraid to knock on some doors, whether you're asking to hunt private or trying to access public. And just do the opposite of what everybody else is doing. Shit, you can go online and see how everybody else is accessing without even driving around. You can see the walking paths. It's ridiculous. They're cow paths. People get so confused and they walk through and they think that's a deer path, and it's like, that's where everybody walks in.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
That's incredible. Incredible information, guys. I'm learning so much in such a short amount of time, and it almost makes it seem like before, like when I asked you that question about being intimidating, you are simplifying things in such quick fashion that it's like, gosh, it almost seems like I could probably even do it.
That's why you need to travel with somebody when you go do that.
Yeah.
Well, I
You
mean,
gotta
the
know
thing
a
is,
piece of
like,
land from somebody.
every time you do it more, you kind of like you have a little more confidence in your decision making. The more you do it, like you feel better about those decisions. And sometimes it doesn't work out, but sometimes it does.
I gotta be honest, I don't hardly even deer hunt around here. You know, like fishing is my main thing, and I spend almost all of my time in the summer. Like, you know, I don't know, maybe I use it as an excuse at times too, like, oh, that's the best time to be scouting and planting food plots and this and that. And, you know, I kind of use it as a crutch for maybe why I don't go deer hunting and this and that. But it seems like an adventure that, like, see, I like, you know, hunting and fishing for different things, but like to have that adventure, to be going somewhere new, that's kind of the stuff that I dig. You know what I mean?
You'll
like,
remember that whether you're a success or a failure.
I love
remember
the
it more.
unknown of it. For me, that's anyways like just, dude, you got a couple days to go make this happen. Like, can you do it?
Yep.
You know?
Yeah. That's cool. And I've done.
Same can be said with fishing.
Yeah.
I mean, shit. Last year we were chasing rumors, fishing muskie bodies of water for muskies, going up little creeks that regular boats couldn't get into. We couldn't put a ranger into it. We had to put a rowboat or a john boat in. You get down a foot of skinny water, go like a mile and a half down a creek to get to a body of water that everybody says has muskies, but there's no public access, and you fish and you try. We did that, and we had a lot of fun doing it. We saw fish.
Yeah.
Those are really cool adventures that you can remember, even if you don't catch something.
Right.
Because you went outside the box and you weren't surrounded by everybody else.
So what's some hunts that you like? What are your bucket list hunts? I guess is
My bucket list. I'd love to go to Alaska someday. But I mean, my big thing, I've never hunted elk before, and
We're gonna start putting in for Utah points.
yeah, no, I'm 32 now, so I should probably do it before I'm too old. But I do love. I don't know. I just got to think about chasing mule deer. But the thing is, you go to Nebraska, and where I am, there are
states where you get a
and Wyoming had that too. It's like a
tag
combo
where
tag.
you can use it for either or.
So where I was in Nebraska, like there's more whitetails than mule deer, but there's mule deer there. So like,
Aren't there states though you can do elk or muley, or is it just
it's Idaho might be like
Idaho?
that. I don't quote me on that.
Don't know for sure.
I don't think so, but because I think you have to buy another tag. Yeah.
Okay, but like you go to Nebraska, and I'm like every time I've driven out there, I've just had like mule deer on the mind, but it's like, oh, those are some nice whitetails. You end up kind of like dialing in on that a little more.
Or we're Midwesterners. That's what we're used to.
And
we
they
know
don't,
'em.
dude. No one out there. They all love their mule deer. Like they care less about whitetails. It's
And
like,
we're like,
it's a
"Screw
really
those
nice buck. Like,
I kind of found the same thing too. Like the people who hunt muleys, like don't really care about a whitetail.
they don't at all. It's weird.
Like,
It's really weird.
It is really, really weird. And they act totally different, which is just crazy. Like you'll find whitetail. Like we found whitetails all in like river bottoms, like really tight to river bottoms, and then the muleys are just like, I'm gonna go stand on this haymow. You know?
And they're listening to us like, these guys, they don't care anything about muleys. They just care about whitetails. Or at least that guy talking right now. That's me. I love my whitetails. Fucking love them.
Oh, yeah. But well, even like.
So is it a destination hunt for either of you, or is it a species hunt? Like, would be your number
Yes.
one. Yeah.
So yours is muley or elk?
I don't know.
You
like,
said both, kind of.
bucket list would be elk, but like I like mule. Like I don't know. It's kind of like that. You know, you're out west when you're hunting mule deer, seeing mule deer type of deal. Well, I hunt whitetails every year around here, but like,
yeah,
I want to hunt whitetails in in Iowa.
Okay.
Like that's a bucket list for me.
Okay.
You know,
That's
who
a sexy
doesn't
bucket list.
who does not wanna at least once. I mean, by the time I draw that tag, I'll probably have.
That's
what
your.
are- what are their
But that's your bucket
That's
list.
not my
hunt?
bucket list.
Come on,
but
that's what we're talking about. Bucket.
It's
Well,
one of them.
here.
I can have a couple.
Let
of
me
them,
set
can't
the
I?
stage. Yukon territory, canoe, river, Yukon moose, big paddles, giant paddles, with
Yeah,
traditional archery.
I'd be into that, but
So you
My
go
wallet
to the
might
dock.
But I'm saying bucket list. I mean, that's your bucket
Yeah,
list.
you have to think like
That's
you go to
before
the
you
doctor,
die, you gotta do
right?
it one
and the
time.
doctor
Yeah.
says you got one more fall to hunt. What are you gonna?
By
hunt?
the way,
probably
that's
mo-
mine.
it's probably moose. To be honest.
Okay.
Yeah, dude, that's so freaking cool.
So it would be like moose or sheep in Alaska.
Okay.
It would,
Alright.
That would be one of them.
So you're moose too then, huh?
I'm moose
What
through and
about-
through.
We're gonna spin the table.
Even
here.
if
what
I go
about
to
you guys?
Russia, even if I go
Oh
to
gosh,
Russia,
I don't even know. You know, like
Thanks for asking. I don't know. I think it would be cool to shoot an elk. I think that'd be pretty cool. Yeah.
I'm all
As far as hunts go.
I'm all about the elk too, but I think I'm with you on the moose because
yeah.
it's just there's something about it, but it doesn't even have to be the Yukon. It doesn't have to be nothing. Like it doesn't have to be a trophy elk moose hunt. It's just the moose during the rut, and that's it.
I think about Russia and I think about Yukon territory. Those are the two places I think about going and killing a moose with boat archery tackle.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to do it traditional.
Yeah.
I used to shoot traditional. In the last 12 years, I've done nothing but well, 4 years ago, I picked up a longbow and was prepping for a bear hunt. But then all I did was see whitetails. I shot a deer, but I didn't see any bears, which is stupid. But anyways, I tried going back to my roots and do that again, but it just didn't stick with me. But
There's just
I'd love
something
to do
like
that.
So we went to Canada a couple times fishing. When you saw an animal that you could drive a car underneath, it's just like
Yeah, it's neat. It's really
I
cool.
want to kill it.
There's such a, it's just a big giant like milestone in my life. I mean, yeah, it looks like butter walking on legs. It's just like the most amazing meat. Have you eaten
Well,
moose?
they eat good,
I've
man.
eaten it one time. Yeah.
So good, and they're such beautiful monarch animals. But the reason that I think about Russia or like Yukon is because of the habitat.
Yeah.
It's like elk too. Like when I think of elk, I don't think of going to open terrain so much as I think of like I don't think of like a big wallow or something. I think of birch with these yellow poplar
Sure,
leaves
yeah,
everywhere, and then this elk coming through it. Like that to me is like that's my ideal. Yeah, I want to kill an elk out in a wallow too, or some wide open. Sure, but that's not the bucket list. That's something I know I can do. I want to do that one image I have in my head.
Mm-hmm.
It's more artistic. It's fine points.
So do you look at a DIY hunt as like a way to challenge yourself a little bit throughout the season? Like, I just thought of it the other day. I'm like, maybe I should try something out of state again this year, or just in a different area. Whether it might just be Wisconsin, I might burn up my buck tag in a different county. I don't know, but just to do something a little different to challenge myself.
I don't know if we have the time to do that. We just sort of what we can afford and have time for.
That's another. Yeah, that's another thing.
I don't know if it's a challenge for me as much as like I just like see new ground.
Yep.
Like yeah, it's harder, but like I don't go out there like just trying to challenge myself. I'm out when I go out west, it's like let's just check this out.
The
Like
hardest
it's so
part
cool.
about leaving is leaving your local tag during a prime time to go somewhere else to risk it all.
Yeah.
If you watch we have an episode called Montana Wild with Nick Bale, and he's an adventure hunter too, very much like AJ Kissel, Travis' cousin. And this guy goes all over Alaska. He goes 4 or 5 times a year. He goes to Montana a couple times a year. He's everywhere. And that guy, this last year, he goes and shoots a 12-pointer on opening day of gun season here in Wisconsin, but in Montana. So, I don't really care to hunt with a gun, but I can't miss opening day of Wisconsin gun season. It's just tradition.
Yep.
I know.
And he left it to go risk it out of state. That's pretty badass.
I even struggled to risk hunting the land that we've always hunted
Yeah.
forever and ever to hunt my own property that I just purchased. It's
You
like
know, that's fair. Like that,
you
I
know,
get it.
Yeah.
It was a tough decision, but
100%. It's hard to freaking leave, man. It's hard to leave your own ground that you're familiar with to go risk it all for a short amount of time. Especially because you're not taking, if you got kids, you're leaving your kids behind. If you're leaving your kids behind, somebody's got to watch them. If that's not your wife, then you're putting it on somebody else, or it's costing you a bunch of money and you miss your kids. And if it is your wife, you're thinking they're like probably pissed at you the whole time you're gone because they're like, damn, it's a lot of work.
you just can't think
You
about
better
that,
bring
though.
home some meat, you know? It's just kind of, no, not that really like
But
that.
like,
but
I
you
mean,
know what I mean.
my oldest is just turned 8, so like, he knows I'm going hunting, and
Yeah.
he'll call me at night and like, hey, when are you coming home? I'm like, I don't know, Take's not filled yet, bud. Like,
Yeah.
we'll see.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I mean, it drains you a little bit that way, you
Yeah.
know.
So as we're wrapping this up, what's your so on your channel? What's each one of your favorite out of state or non-Wisconsin hunts that are on the channel?
Mine is the Nebraska hunt me and Steve Jeffrey just did this past December.
Okay.
It was, I don't know, it was it was just like,
Yeah.
it was adventure from beginning to end.
Pretty sweet.
It was, I mean, we literally like, we kind of like halfway through the trip decided to hunt that an extra morning, and then even the final morning we both punched tags and like got out late. I got a speeding ticket on the way home. Not a ticket. I got a warning.
Yeah.
There you go.
But it was just,
Film that, by the way.
and you know, and I shot a half rag, a small buck, and Steve shot a doe, but it was just like we had so much damn fun together.
You know, if you go on
You know what I
Facebook
mean?
and you post a picture of a small buck, you're gonna get eaten alive. And when you watch this video and you look at YouTube, which is some of the harshest critics that we have, I think there's maybe, I don't even know if there's a one single thumbs down. It's all likes, and there's a lot of them, and it's pretty cool. They just respect that adventure. If you watch
That's
that
awesome.
episode, it's pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Mine in particular was AJ Kissel, one of our first episodes ever, one of the first 4, I think it's episode number 3 or 4. It's a billy goat hunt on public land up in Alaska. And him and his dad, Andy, they go up in those mountains and they kill them above the clouds. And they kill them with bows. And you see that episode, man, you will just think about your bucket list all over again, because you're going to be like, that is epitome of cool. We watched his cousin at what, 20, at that time he's 23, 24 years old.
Yeah, it's pretty young.
Wide open, stalking up, and you're going to be like, how did he get that close to billy goat? Using terrain features to get up tight to like 20 yards to shoot this billy goat with his bow, using boulders and stuff. And his dad is filming from like 200-300 yards away on top
He had
of
a
a
head
ridge.
cam on too.
And he had a
It
head
turned out so cool.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
Watch that and you're going to be like, well, you got to be kidding me. It's really cool footage. So that's a favorite of mine.
Yeah.
Anything else, Dave?
I don't know, man. My head is spinning. I can't wait to rewatch this and take notes the whole
right.
time. So yeah.
Well, gentlemen, thank you very much. There it is. Check them out on YouTube, on Facebook, on Amazon Prime, on
Carbon TV.
And like everything. Send them a message and tell them which episode was your favorite. And thanks for watching or listening, guys.
We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you
for
guys.
having us.
This is Avid Outdoors.